Kia ora and welcome to Let's Talk Endometriosis Aotearoa, where we share honest kōrero about living with and supporting and advocating for those with endometriosis here in Aotearoa. I'm Yesenia, the founder of Endo Warriors Aotearoa, and today I'm joined by Natalie, the writer behind Endo Empathy, New Zealand's first book exploring the emotional side of living with endometriosis. Natalie's own experience with stage 4 endo and major surgery inspired her to create this beautiful resource for our community. Welcome, Natalie. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Thank you. All right, so let's just dive right into it. Can you share a little bit about your endo journey and what led you to be diagnosed and how it shaped your life?
Yeah, sure. So I think thinking about endometriosis, there's lots of different symptoms and pinpoints throughout life that I think a lot of us reflect on afterwards and say, yes, that makes sense. But I think for me, when talking about my journey to diagnosis, it kind of starts back in 2020. That's where I sort of start to tell the story. So my husband and I had just sold all of our belongings, rented our house out, rehomed our beloved cat, and decided to move to Melbourne for a new adventure. And then COVID-19 came along, and we unfortunately lived for about 7 months in one of the harshest lockdowns in the Southern Hemisphere. We couldn't really have picked a worse city to move to for COVID to come along. And over that time, my mental health started to take a really big hit. I was really struggling with being so isolated, being stuck at home. All of our dreams of living in this awesome new city were no longer coming to fruition, and it was a bit scary. So, my mental health took a hit, and then I started to notice that I was developing all these digestive issues that I'd never had before. I had really severe bloating. I would be up for hours in the middle of the night in excruciating pain, not sure if I wanted to vomit, poop. I couldn't really sit down comfortably, and I was just really confused. I hadn't experienced anything like that before. And not long after that, we decided to move back to New Zealand. And around 6 months in, I decided to go and see a doctor to try and figure out what it was that was causing this to happen. Textbook endometriosis diagnosis number one, I was diagnosed with tentatively with IBS, which many of us face. And I was encouraged to try the low FODMAP diet and to explore managing my anxiety a little bit more. And so I did that, and it did work for a time. My symptoms cleared up. But to me, it never felt like a clear answer to where these symptoms had come from or what was going on. And then fast forward to 2022, we moved again up to Tauranga, and I decided to come off the contraceptive because we were ready to start trying for a family. And that is when a whole lot of other symptoms reared their ugly heads, and it became quite clear that the contraceptive had been masking what was really going on. So I started to have painful bowel movements, not just on my period, but all the time. I was dealing with constipation and diarrhea, bloating, abdominal pain through my thighs and my lower back, painful intercourse. My body was a wreck, basically. And I just thought, this is just so not right. And so I started really proactively reaching out to my doctor, regularly asking for answers. And they sort of followed the format that, most GPs in New Zealand will follow. So I had a pelvic ultrasound, nothing came back from that. I was referred to the gynaecological team at Tauranga Hospital and was declined. Gastroenterology team declined to see me. I then reached a point that my symptoms were so severe that I was actually passing blood clots in my stools when I was on my period cycle, which was terrifying, upsetting, and confusing. And at that point, I went back to the doctor and I said, I actually have a family history of bowel cancer. Something, we need to figure out what's causing this. And I was finally referred for a colonoscopy, which was conducted in November. And they found something. They found a growth, but the specialists conducting the scans thought that it was cancer because they'd never seen anything like it associated with endometriosis before. And of course, with my family history combined with that, I left that clinic with brochures talking about, potential cancer diagnosis, next steps, all those sorts of things, which was really very scary. And unfortunately, the sample that they took from the growth at that time, they weren't able to test it enough to give me a diagnosis. So I then had what's called a sigmoidoscopy, which is the cousin of a colonoscopy. It's not quite as invasive, but they still had to put something into my bowels, take a sample from the growth, and fortunately this time they were able to get a diagnosis. So I still remember it was a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang, I picked up, it was the colorectal specialist, and he said, I've got good news, it's not cancer, it's stage 4 endometriosis. And it was pretty bizarre because I was celebrating, this very severe diagnosis, but it was, compared to having bowel cancer, it felt like a relief because it felt like something that I could manage. And it was just good to finally have an answer, really. Yeah.
Wow. What a journey to be diagnosed. And during lockdown, and COVID, and even when we came out of lockdown, it was like so many hospitals not even taking referrals. So to live through all of that and then, of course, be diagnosed with IBS, which a lot of people are misdiagnosed with. And, like you said about the contraceptive, a lot of people don't realise how much it masks, and quite often people that might be only in stage 1 or stage 2 endo go on contraceptive and it masks it, but it's still very active in your body and growing, and then they come off it and everything is 1,000 times worse because you've no longer got this little band-aid that was just sort of holding everything at bay. And, even, people don't understand, the painful sex. That's quite a big thing, especially in a relationship. I remember, when I was younger and we were trying for a baby and having painful sex and trying for a baby, it's not fun, And like, people are like, you must be enjoying it. No, I'm not. There's so many hidden parts of endo that people don't understand how each thing can wear you down and make you struggle every day. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. So you've been through some major surgeries. What helped you cope emotionally during this time?
Yeah, so I guess just to sort of set the stage for where my head was at after my diagnosis, in some ways I was incredibly fortunate. It was only around 2 months until I was able to have surgery through the public system to remove my endometriosis. So I had a bowel resection, so they cut 15 centimetres out of my bowel, rejoined the healthy parts of the bowel together, and I also had a gynaecologist in theatre who then removed a whole lot of endometrial tissue from my pelvic area. So it was a 7-hour surgery, which was a pretty tense wait for my husband to get the phone call to hear how things were going. And as a result of that, because of how they had to remove the growth from my bowel, I had to have a temporary stoma, or the full formal term for what I had was a loop ileostomy. So the reasoning behind that was that in order for the joint in my bowel to reheal properly, they didn't want my bowel to be active, basically. So they had to find a way to get all of my output from when I was eating to go somewhere else. So what they did was they made an incision in my stomach and they pulled a portion of my digestive system out and formed what they call a stoma. And I would then wear a little bag on my stomach, which would catch all of the output from what I was eating and drinking throughout the day. and avoiding the bowel altogether. So before I went in for surgery, they gave me a 50-50 chance that I would have that. And to be honest, I didn't even want to think about it, so I didn't. And then I woke up after surgery, and lo and behold, there was Sylvia the stoma, as we named her. And that was really confronting. So not only had I only just gotten this diagnosis, undergone a major surgery, was dealing with this massive unexpected change to my body, I also knew that I'd be needing to undergo more surgery to reverse the stoma at some point not too far down the line, and then go through more recovery from that. So it was a very intense time, and I'd also recently just lost my job, which was really challenging. But on the positive side, I had managed to find something else in a much more supportive environment, who actually allowed me to work part-time for a huge portion of that year, which I'm very grateful for. So that's where my head was at. And in terms of how I coped emotionally with that, I've always been someone who is really positive and bubbly and wants to get the most out of life. And so in this really difficult circumstance, I just fell back to tools that I'd been developing since I first had my mild depression back in 2020. And those things that I was using was talk therapy, journaling, meditation, yoga, getting out in nature, and the most crucial thing, and this is really what partially inspired me to write Endo Empathy, was just accepting my feelings as they came and not trying to fight them or push them down. So I have a really clear memory. It was 3 days after my surgery. I'd finally had a shower that day. I had washed my hair. I felt like a new woman, and my husband put me in a rickety old wheelchair and wheeled me out onto the hospital rooftop balcony out in the sunshine with some beautiful plants around, and I just felt the breeze and the sun on my face, and I just cried, and I just let all of those feelings go. And it was just such an important moment for me to just have that emotional release. And I think that moment stood out to me, and it was something that I wanted to continue to allow myself to do as I continued on my healing journey, because I knew it would be a long one.
Wow, amazing, and so much, and so awesome to hear that you had a supportive work environment, and such an amazing husband to support you. And like crying can be so helpful in so many ways. I do yoga, what we call yoga off the mat, so mindfulness and breathing exercise and things like that, because in my, I guess I call it my past life before things changed in my body, I used to be a kids yoga teacher, so I know the benefits, like especially when my pain is high and I'm in that flight or fright mode, like what I need to do so I can focus on where my pain is and how to help. And crying, so beneficial. I spent close on and off 6 months straight in hospital after my hysterectomy, and I think I used to cry quite a lot. So I set myself a timer and allow myself to cry for 15 minutes, and then I'll just cry, and then I'd put on a song and just like sing and dance and stuff like that as much as I could. And then eventually that 15 minutes went down to 10 minutes and then 5 minutes, and then it was like, right, okay, I'm good. And every now and then, I still have a cry, but I think it does help. I think we are told too many times to push those feelings in. I remember there's an episode of The Simpsons where Lisa is with Marge, and as a kid I didn't really think much of it, but then I saw it again as an adult, and Lisa's like, but she said, I can't remember the word for word, but she said something like, I'm so sad and so hurt, what do I do with all these feelings? And Marge says to her, you push them down until you don't have to worry about them, and you don't speak about them like a good girl. And I was like, whoa, like, that's horrible. But as a kid, I probably heard that. I was like, okay, yep. Yeah. And I was like, oh, kind of see why this isn't a kids program. But yeah, like, it always like comes to my head. I was like, wow, and that's true, because so many times we're told, don't make a scene. Don't don't stand out. You know, I was always told, like, children should be seen and not heard. Just sit there quietly. So, wow. All right. So you've talked a lot about your, how you deal with things in surgeries and stuff that's happened. What were some of the biggest misconceptions or challenges that you faced before finally being diagnosed, and even maybe like after being diagnosed?
I think, the biggest thing for me, I think there's a few things, but the thing that stands out the most is just the lack of awareness around endometriosis, in terms of even knowing that it is out there, and secondly, what endometriosis even is. So I do remember back in 2020, or it might have been 2021, my auntie came to stay with me, and she had endometriosis, and she saw me struggling, and she said, "Have you ever thought that it might be this?" And no, hadn't even considered, it hadn't even crossed my mind. And I mentioned it to the doctor I was seeing at that point in time, and the default question was, do you have heavy periods? Do you have painful periods? And that was never a symptom that I had experienced, not until I came off the pill, because of course that had been masking all of that. So I think just that lack of awareness of what are all the other symptoms, and that this is a whole body disease. If they had asked me some broader questions at that time about lower back pain, pain during sex, pain during bowel movements, those other aspects that actually lead and are symptoms of endometriosis, I think that I could have had my diagnosis a lot earlier, and I potentially could have avoided having to have such severe surgery and a stoma and all of those things that come with it. It all sort of just snowballs when you don't have that initial support to get that diagnosis.
Definitely. I remember when I was officially diagnosed and they told me after surgery, the surgeon said, "You've got endometriosis." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Not to worry, it's all gone now." And I was like, okay. I mean, I was like 20, so I was like, sweet. And there's nothing out there, and there's just the stigma around it and things like that. And even when I go to schools and teach, we teach free period education and endometriosis education, and we do them both together so people know that they're not the same thing. Because, I think if we start teaching our youth earlier on, if you are experiencing these symptoms, this is what it could be. Let's get on to it straight away. But also encouraging the doctors not to give 12, 13, 14-year-olds contraceptive, which they could be on for 10, 20 years, and then they come off it, and it's just, all these challenges like you had.
Exactly. Yeah.
Drives me wild. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the book. I'm really excited to read it when it comes out. So what inspired you to write Endo Empathy and bring this book to life?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two answers to that question. There's the moment of inspiration of specifically when I thought of the concept for the book, and I'll tell you about that, but I also sort of want to talk about the other things that led to it, which is more about me, which is I've always been a writer. I've always loved words, and I've always known that I would write a book one day. And I've pursued a career in communications. I've studied communications and creative writing. So it's a skill that I've, honed and developed forever. And I'm also someone who I'm just such a people person, and I have big emotions. That's me. I love connecting with people, helping others, being upfront about how I'm feeling. And so I guess, those things is what culminated to this light bulb moment that I had in 2023. I'd had my stoma reversal. I was going to see my personal trainer at the time. She was a really awesome and empowering woman, and she was doing lots of work in her own personal life, chasing down goals, and we were just talking about that kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, I'd really love to write a book one day, and I think it might be about endometriosis. And it was on the drive home from that I thought, oh my God, Endo Empathy, what's my journey and my story? And it was the emotional side of the disease, and it was not having a resource out there that spoke to that side of it, and not having a New Zealand perspective on endometriosis out there. And yeah, as somebody who processes things through consuming media and reading, listening to podcasts, that's what I turned to when I got my diagnosis. And there was one book called How to Endo by Bridget Hustwaite, which was an incredible resource for me in terms of knowing ways to support my body and my physical management of the disease. But the biggest spark that I got from it was when I was reading her story, and there was an anecdote in there that just so reflected how I had felt on my journey, and that validation was huge. And that was another moment of emotional outburst. I just cried and cried, and it just felt like a valve of pressure had been released. And I just thought there needs to be something out there that is designed for people to get that validation and to not feel alone and to feel okay with all of the feelings that you have with endometriosis.
100%. And that's the thing, like there's lots of, well, not lots, there's information out there that talks about endo symptoms and all these ideas, all these people try this diet, but there's not really anything out there that talks about like people's lived experience. And that's what you said makes people feel seen and things like that. Like I know often when, like I post things about my struggles daily with endo, the amount of DMs that I get from someone saying thank you, it's so nice to know that someone else is going through this and stuff like that. And I think that's what this book will bring to people, that validation, knowing that like, oh, other people experience this too, like this, I'm not alone, like, so that's awesome. So you describe it as an emotional companion for life with endo. So that's what's on your website. What does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, I think it's, I really loved the term companion, because the book at its core is showing people that they're not alone. So to me, I see it twofold. Firstly, it's a companion because it's going to walk alongside you, giving you tools, practical tools and resources throughout your life with endometriosis. It's not a book that you read and you put on the shelf and you forget about it. It's been written in mind that every time you're feeling sad or every time you're feeling happy or proud in relation to your disease, you can pull the book out, you can open the chapter on pride, you can read about what that feels like in your body to help you connect with your body again. You can read the tools that I've written to help you process that emotion. There's journaling prompts in there. And then the most exciting part in my mind is there's quotes in there from people from the New Zealand endometriosis community reflecting on a time that they have felt that emotion living with that disease. And I'm choking up just talking about it because endometriosis is such an invisible illness. People, I'm sure every single one of us has heard in their lifetime, oh, you can't hide it so well. I never would have guessed. You seem fine. You seem this, you seem that. I can't see anything going on physically for you, and therefore you must be fine. And it's also invisible because, like you said, people say endometriosis and they say, what's that? And so this is a companion to, walk alongside you and give you those tools. And also it's your friend. Like I want it to feel like you're getting a hug from the endo community. And I was just so overwhelmed with the response of people. I had 33 people who were brave enough to tap into what can be really difficult and traumatic memories and emotions and to write them down and share them in a format that now people can turn to when they're having a tough time.
That's awesome. It brings a tear to my eye, like just knowing that there'll be something out there like that for people to be seen. How did you go about blending your own story with expert insights and community voices into the book?
Yeah, it started to take its own shape, like the format of the book, fairly quickly. I always knew I wanted the chapters to be grouped by emotion. And I also really liked how to Endo, her interviews with experts were a really informal Q&A kind of style. So I always knew that whoever I spoke to add some more research-backed insights to readers to understand why I'm encouraging them to do this, I wanted to do that in a really approachable, conversational kind of way. And then I suppose the third part was my own story, and it felt really important to me to have that in the book, but it also was important that that wasn't the crux of the book. And so what I've ended up doing is grouping the book into specific sections. And I've written these down because I can't remember them off the top of my head, so I'm just going to pull it up and take you through it. So there's a welcome note from me, just as an introduction, and an explanation on how to use the book. And then there's a section called Get to Know Your Endo and Emotions, and that's where I speak with a obstetrician gynaecologist. It's actually the gynaecologist who did my excision surgery. I speak with a clinical psychologist, and we talk about emotional acceptance. And then I speak with a researcher, and they talk about how self-compassion and endometriosis can work together. And then there's a section called Explore Your Emotional Journey. And that is the part where it breaks down the different emotions into chapters with the quotes and how to identify that emotion in your body. And then at the end, I've done a chapter for my own story as well. So that's at the end, there's a part where people can read in depth. A full from start to finish what my journey looked like. And again, hopefully what they'll find in there is pockets of things that they experienced as well.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. Was there a particular story or quote in the book that really stayed with you?
Yes. There were a lot, but the two that sort of come to mind for me, there's one that's really empowering and one that's quite emotional and sad. So one woman, Trish, when she was talking about pride, she spoke about the fact that she is really proud of herself, that she still shows up to kids' birthdays and baby showers to support her friends and to be there and to be part of those people's lives, even though she knows that she's probably going to cry about it in the car on the way home. And I just think that's such a great example of how people with endometriosis are still there for the ones that they love, and you can be hurting on the inside emotionally, not just physically. You can be hurting inside emotionally, but you can also at the same time have these other experiences of still being connected with your friends and wanting to be there for them, and you can feel different things at the same time, and that's okay. And then another one, a woman shared that she was sick of feeling sad all the time, and she decided to book a skydive. And I just thought that is so cool, you're just taking life into your own hands. And those two quotes for me, I think they're quite a neat summary of the various emotions and ways that endo shows up in our lives day to day.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I love hearing about people that have endo and that have just done these amazing things. There's so much that people with endo and those with endo have to do every day, like you said, supporting your friends, and there's that heartbreak, and then doing things like a skydive I could never imagine. I remember reading Susie Ferguson's book, and it talks about her time when she was over in the war and doing journalism there and having endo and her periods, and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. And then it's just amazing what people can overcome. But then sometimes you feel like, oh wow, it just gives you that sort of encouragement to know, well, okay, I can do this. And sometimes for me, I look at those things and I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, and that might be really big for me, which someone can do that's so little, but that's if they can do this, then I can make myself get up and go for a walk today. So that's amazing. Now, we've heard a bit about your book. So tell us, what can people do to support you? Where can we get this book? What's happening? What can we do? How can the community get behind this?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about that. It's really exciting, and I have written this for the community. So I've been overwhelmed by the support and response from people when I've spoken about my vision for this book already. So the manuscript is written, it's with the publishers, and we have applied for funding to cover the cost of the printing and distribution of the book. So that's where it's at. But the goal is for it to make it onto bookshelves and in people's hands in 2026. So in the meantime, people can go to my website, which is endoempathynz.com. And I've got a banner at the very top of my page where you can subscribe to be the first to find out when the book is going to be published and to sign up for pre-orders as well.
Awesome.
And then I also have an Instagram and a TikTok, which is Endo Empathy NZ. And that's where I just share updates. I share little snippets from the book, things about self-compassion and emotions, a little bit about myself and what's going on in my life as well. So, those are the places that people can go if they feel a connection with Endo Empathy.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your journey and giving our Endo community such a powerful and compassionate resource through Endo Empathy. I'm really looking forward to reading that. As you've heard from Natalie, you can go to her webpage and subscribe for updates and pre-order the book. You've been watching Let's Talk Endometriosis Aotearoa, where we share real stories and kōrero about how to raise awareness and support for our Endo community. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video to help us keep this conversation going.